it's not the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality. For me, that lens became one of growth. My stories from my childhood and how that has impacted my life makes me want to be an advisor to make an impact on other families and the clients that I work with. Not taking no for an answer is what inspires me every day. The work that we do sits at the intersection of wealth, family dynamics, human vulnerability, and complexity is increasing. My story is intention always comes first. What is your intention and how can we plan around that in the best way possible? You can't tell me that I can't do something because I will do it. It's just the stubbornness in me, I think.
Welcome to the Differentiation podcast. My name is Michèle Sorgaroli and I am your host. And today we are being joined by our very special guest, Alysha Tse. Alysha is a wealth advisor here in Vancouver, and she helps families structure their financial life while also building a legacy with more intention. I love that. Now, as you'll come to notice as you get to know Alysha, she has an alphabet of letters after her name. It's a serious alphabet, and I counted them, Alysha. There are 25 letters after your name. Not only that, she has a growing list, a very impressive list of ways that she has been contributing to her industry to have an impact, including having represented Canada at the STEP Worldwide Council for global discussions on trust and estate planning. And yet that's not all. She's also an active mentor for the next generation of financial planners. And if that's not enough, she's a dedicated parent and wife to her young family. So this is a busy woman who's got lots on the go. And Alysha, it's just a delight to welcome you today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Michèle. And oh my goodness, can I hire you to do my intro in every single video?
It wasn't difficult. There's a lot to talk about. So clearly, your expertise, you're clearly committed. You've been a lifelong learner for sure. Having so much evidence of that. The thing I want to highlight here is something that stood out to me in our past conversations, but also just even some of your online content rather, this idea of the intergenerational outcomes, intergenerational impact. We heard a little bit about that in your intro already, but there's something about the context of wealth in the bigger picture that seems to be important to you. And I know you've been in this industry for what, 14 or 15 years now, it looks like. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your journey. I'd like to take you right back to the beginning.
Okay.
Why financial planning, first of all? Why did you choose this industry 14, 15 years ago? And then we'll take it from there and see where this leads us around intergenerational outcomes.
Oh gosh, thank you for asking, Michèle. So taking it back to the very beginning, I grew up in an immigrant family. My mom came from Hong Kong when she was 4 years old, and my dad had left Vietnam after the war under a very difficult circumstance. It's one of those stories that carries both resilience and risk. And for him, there was no certainty in his life, and it was just really a decision to pursue a different life. And so growing up, that wasn't something that was talked about often, but you could really feel it. And it shaped how I thought about stability, opportunity, and what it means to build something from nothing. And so, his story was really a story about survival and courage, and just knowing what he had to navigate gave me a very different perspective on what opportunity really means. So I was born and raised in Vancouver, and my parents really wanted us to integrate into Western culture. We only spoke English at home. I should really have been trilingual, but I only speak English. And I even grew up playing ice hockey, which doesn't get more Canadian than that.
Love it. Good for you. That's amazing. Well, your parents just took you, they completely integrated, right?
Exactly, completely integrated.
Wow.
Even though we had completely immersed ourselves into Western culture, I would say at home there was still a very strong Asian cultural foundation. Money wasn't something that we talked about openly. It was always just implied, never explained or discussed. And I would say conversations about wealth, estate planning, or leaving a legacy behind were not just avoided, but it was, entirely out of the conversation.
Uh,
Um, I think there's this saying, I think I don't know if it's my family or Chinese culture, that, talking about death, estate planning, or wills or anything like that is, almost like digging your own grave.
I've
And
heard
so,
that before. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
these conversations just were non-existent.
Scary. So, not
Yeah,
just something to avoid, but something that was scary because it could manifest in an outcome you don't want, right?
exactly.
I would
Yeah.
imagine that's a whole different level of not wanting to go there. It's not safe. It's a really
Mhm.
interesting theme around that. Thank you for sharing that. I just want to highlight, as you've talked so far, you're really speaking about these themes. You talked about your dad coming at a time when there wasn't stability or security in his life, sense of certainty, and also coming to something where that represented opportunity to him. That's what I heard there. The other thing, survival and courage, you highlighted. So there's a few really, really big ideas in this conversation already that were
Yeah.
an influence to you from such a young age. And then the idea that this topic where you are currently fully invested in your life around wealth and legacy wasn't something that was even explored. So what happened that allowed you or caused you to become interested in wealth planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up in an environment where achievement was just, it's not only expected, but more
Mm.
importantly, it was improvement was always expected. Even if I did well,
Uh,
the question was always like, what's next? You come home with an A on your report card, why not an A plus? And
mm,
so, I was just in the mindset of constantly challenging myself to go further. And looking back, I don't think it wasn't just those experiences that shaped
mhm.
me. I think it's how I interpreted them. And
Of
so
course,
there's
yeah.
there's a quote by Sean Aker that I often look back at, and he says, "It's not necessarily the reality that shapes us, but the lens through which your brain views the world that shapes your reality." And for
Nice.
me, that lens became one of growth. It was just, I didn't see gaps as limitations. I saw them as opportunities. And I, every, there's kind of this running joke, which I'll kind of just speaking about the alphabet soup behind my name, that every time somebody would ask me a question that I did not know the answer to, I would get a designation in it. And that is entirely true. I am and always will be just so curious about things, and want to ensure that I am the best advisor and giving my clients the best advice that I can within my realm.
Why is
Sorry. So
that? Yeah, just to quickly, can we pause there for a quick second?
yeah, yeah.
I can hear that that's really important to you to be the best advisor that you can be in your realm of expertise. And also, if you didn't have an answer, you got a letters to not just answer that question, but to take it to a whole new degree. Why is that so important to you to really show up with such a high level of expertise?
I think that our I think that our industry is so, I think that the impact that our industry has really impacts, the generational outcomes. And I think that's
Mm,
important to me as, knowledge and skills and wisdom is passed throughout generations, and just ensuring that the importance of having these kinds of conversations and being
mm.
just present, talking to your family about wealth, and just being able to communicate that in a way that clients understand. I think just the impact of that is very important to me.
You felt that a little bit as a younger woman in your family, right? Where wealth wasn't discussed. I would imagine.
Yes.
When, right? So I'm curious, when did it become important? And when did this perspective of intergenerational and legacy start to really form for you?
Yeah. So just in terms of, my story and how I fell into the industry, I'll take you back into high school.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
So during high school, my mom had some mental health challenges,
Mm,
which I was experiencing as a young high school
right.
um, teenager. And so I had left high school early, and coming back to it, coming back to my education, I had a whole new level of intention of what I wanted to do in my
Mm,
life. And I knew that I wanted to make an impact in other people's lives. That was very important to me. I wanted to help other people. And so my actual dream was to go into medicine, which is
mm,
very different than where I am at now. But
yeah.
my dream was to go into medicine. And so after high school, I took a gap year. I worked many different part time jobs because I wanted to save up enough to pay for my own post secondary school. And I ended
Mm,
up at a brokerage firm, and I found myself falling in love with the industry. Um, there was just so much I didn't know that I wanted to learn. There was so much I was curious about. And that's kind of how I, fell into the realm of,
yeah.
wealth planning, of being an investment advisor, and just carrying, my stories, my childhood, and how that has impacted my life makes me want to be an advisor to make an impact on other families and the clients that I work with.
Mm, yeah. What was it, Alysha, that you fell in love with in this industry when you were first exposed to it?
Oh gosh, everything. I had so many
Love
questions.
that.
I remember I would wake up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd be at the office by 5. I wasn't even hired full time there yet, but I was there asking questions, helping where I could, asking, taking on work that I had no idea what I was doing, and just positioning myself, close to, excellence, wanting to learn more. And just that curiosity is what drives me. And I think that's what made me fall in love with the industry, because there's just so much I didn't know.
Oh, I love that. What do you think is pulling on, like, or what is inspiring this insatiable curiosity, which has been obvious through this first 15 minutes or 10 minutes?
Yeah. I think it's the absence of these
Mm,
conversations happening, in my family throughout my childhood, never having these conversations about money or wealth or what it means to our family. I think that just drove me to want to know more, to want to
mm.
be more curious about it.
That's a curious thing because not everybody would respond the same way to that void in the conversation, right, around money. So I'm curious for you, there are lots of places curiosity can go. What was it about the money piece for you specifically that kind of captured your interest at such an intense level, do you think?
Yeah, just going back to it was just the absence thereof. Like there's so much
So
that
that,
I didn't, yeah, that I didn't know, that I wanted to learn,
mm,
that I wanted to ensure that that impact carried through to the families that I worked with, so they wouldn't
uh,
have that,
uh-huh.
not knowing about finances.
There you go. Excuse me. That's what I'm thinking is there was something, you didn't want other families or other people to experience what you had experienced in that lack or that void in the conversation for you. Were you aware of that as a younger girl in high school and younger, or did that sort of surface later, especially when you were exposed to the industry at the first place?
Oh gosh, definitely when I was exposed to the industry, coming to the industry, I had zero knowledge of finance. I didn't know
Mm,
what a stock was. I didn't know what savings were. I didn't know what securities were. And so I came in completely naive and just being immersed into a wealth of
mm,
knowledge.
mhm,
And I think that, you know, circling back to just the curiosity and the designations, it was really that competitive nature that I had growing up too. Um,
mm,
I I always challenged myself, like, what's next, as in that environment of my parents always asking me, what's next.
yeah.
That challenge of learning more and, understanding more. I have a funny story of how I became so immersed into estate planning, actually, which really, you'll see that theme happening throughout my life. But I was 21 at the time, already working in the industry for a couple of years. And I just being in conversations of wealth and being a financial advisor, there's so many different pillars of wealth management and financial advising that define, what a financial advisor does, right? Now you have conversations about tax planning, estate planning, retirement planning, risk management, portfolio management. Those are all the pillars that make up, what you do for clients. And so when I was, coming across my curiosity in estate planning, I applied to join or become a member of the Estate Planning Council in Vancouver. And so the chair of the Estate Planning Council at that time, who I won't name, but he had denied my application on the basis that I was too young and didn't have enough experience. And just that anger and adrenaline is what propelled me further into the estate planning industry. I ended up joining the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. I, joined the board as a student liaison, became the chair of the programs committee, and, helped curate content for educational events and content for the entire Step Vancouver branch and all their seminars for the last decade. And also, going on to that worldwide council. And it's funny because I look back and I'm kind of like, chair of Estate Planning Council of Vancouver, like in your face, but he has no idea who I am, like zero idea, not even a blip on his radar. But it's just, that constant challenge of myself to do better, to be better, to understand more, and to be, the best advisor that I can in every single facet.
That's so interesting. And reflecting back on the beginning of this conversation, thanks for sharing that story. It's just, it's really highlighting, you made the application, it was denied. So in a sense, you were locked out, right? Locked out of the opportunity. And if we reflect back on your father's journey from Vietnam at a difficult time when he was moving towards opportunity, I would imagine part of that story is what was impacting your response to that denial, that you were too young and not experienced enough. Is that resonate? What's coming up there for you? Because I feel like there's some link there.
Absolutely. I like just looking back on my dad's life and every single hardship that was thrown at him and everything that he was able to overcome, just that resilience, and not taking no for an answer is what inspires me every day to not take no for an answer. To, if someone tells me I'm not good enough or too young or, too early, to this, to that, I, go double down on technical knowledge, on experience, and just learn as much as I can to show them that I'm not too young, that I'm not too inexperienced, that I know enough. I have the wisdom.
Yeah, and that was modeled for you as well, right? Where you had that in your upbringing too, I imagine. So as we're reflecting on this desire for improvement, this desire to continue pushing, this desire to serve is coming up a lot. What happens now if just coming into today and you're thinking about the work that you do today? What do you find most invigorating about your work now, especially on reflecting where you came from 14 years ago when you started?
Yeah. The word that jumps to mind, full circle, is impact. Knowing that I've had an impact on my client's life, that I've impacted them in some sort of way, is probably the thing that fills my cup. I think that's probably the most important reason of why I do what I do.
Tell us more about that. When you're having the kind of impact that is really deep and meaningful for you, what is that?
I think we had talked about this like briefly last time. I almost think that it's like almost a guilty pleasure, selfish feeling of, the more impact that I make on your life, the better I feel about myself.
Mhm.
It's a weird,
Yeah.
odd thing to chase, but
Hmm.
I think that, our the work that we do is so important. It sits at the intersection of wealth, family dynamics, human vulnerability, and complexity is increasing. I work with lots of families that are now cross border, they're blended, they have business ownership, they, you know, are going through regulatory change. They have global assets. There's so many complexities in somebody's life, and being able to translate that complexity to them so that it turns into something that they understand is, the impact that I seek in every single client relationship and every single client that I work with.
Translating complexity into something that they can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why is that so important to you?
I think
That specific piece.
I think you nailed it on the head. Just, going back to, being a young girl and not understanding, finance or having conversations about money, and just, the barrier that it presents in families talking to their kids and their adult children about money. Um, it's very personal for me. I didn't grow up seeing these conversations happen openly. And now it's funny because that's exactly where I spend my time, helping families have the conversations that matter in a way that connects all the different moving parts together.
That's awesome. Really highlighting, I got goosebumps when you said that about it being a barrier in families, that the inability to have these conversations creates a barrier in families. And so the importance of family is really rising in this conversation as we're talking through. Um, when you see this work have the kind of impact you want, what happens in conceptually, or to the extent that you can share, what happens in family dynamics when these conversations happen?
Yes. Oh gosh, a slew of, outcomes happened. Families are more transparent with each other. They are not afraid to talk about money with their kids. Their adult children understands the value of money. They understand what it means to leave behind a legacy. They understand, the hardship, the hard work, and, sweat and tears, and experiences that their parents have gone through in order to create this wealth for them. And what we see in the future of generations being impacted is that, they carry on that legacy. They're not wasteful. They value and appreciate, and they, honor the wealth that their parents have built for them.
Not wasteful, and they value it, and it's honoring. There's that word, honor.
Yeah. Can
Really.
you imagine just being, an adult, and your parents suddenly pass away and you receive a large inheritance, but you've never had a conversation about money. You've never understood, what that money was for, or how that money is to be used after, they left it behind. Um, you just feel lost in translation. This has never been talked about. What are you supposed to do with this? And so I think that having those conversations are so important.
Yeah, I'm hearing a piece around sense of security. Like there's I'm also, if people receive money in a way that when they're not equipped or not ready, it's very disempowering, and there's a part where they feel a lack of security or safety in that. That's what I'm hearing. Is that
Yes,
accurate? Is
yeah,
that what I'm?
absolutely. Absolutely. They feel a little bit lost, right? They don't know, where to take this. And,
Mm,
it's not that it not only, it doesn't just leave behind a lazy generation, but just, you know, being able to understand legacy, right? I think that's important, and it's important to carry on those things through generations and to understand, what was built prior and how can you keep building it.
So I talked about this at the very beginning. There's a story, the family story. It's not just when we talk about so often, and when we talk about um, structured financial plans or structuring financial lives and then building legacy, which I referred to earlier, there's a nugget here where there's something about the what I would call the through story, past, present, future, where the money is almost what I'm hearing, and I'm not sure I'm getting this right, so I'm hoping you'll clarify for me.
Yes.
But the through story where the money is in a way I don't want to say the tool, it's not the tool, but it's the thing that sort of carries things forward, because the money is the only thing that keeps moving forward generation by generation, or not if it's poorly managed, and then that has a whole story related to it too. So I've got you laughing. So I think there's something happening here. Share with me your perspective of what I'm trying to articulate here.
Yeah. I think, at the end of the day, wealth isn't just about accumulation. It's about, how people see it, how they use it, and how it shapes the lives that come after them. And so you're looking at money as also the impact that it makes on future generations. And having those conversations and talking about wealth and how to use it and what your values are will change and shape the way that generations use it to come. So I think that you are on the right track there about, money being kind of the constant thing that's being passed through generations. But I think most importantly, it's the story behind it and the
Mhm.
impact that it makes.
Yeah, the story around the money, right?
Yes.
So I think we're touching on something really interesting here. And as I'm hearing you, I'm hearing that the money is it influences the family story, and it has an impact on how the family sees itself and its own identity and its ability to move forward in in the future that it envisions. There's something there.
I think it's more so not necessarily the money itself, but the conversations about money
Yeah,
that define
yeah,
some of the relationships of the future, right?
yeah. Exactly. It's the stories, right? It's coming
Yeah.
back again, the stories. Um, this is awesome. How stories shape us is what I'm getting at. So, Alysha, you've been at this for quite a while, and I'm curious, what do you think, in terms of your experience, what do you think you do differently or that makes your approach valuable?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. Oh gosh. So just in terms of our team structure and what we do differently for clients is, a lot of being an advisor is about, having that relationship with your clients, right? You have this relationship where you know their financial lives, their kids, their cats, their dogs, their relationships that they have with siblings and their parents, and kind of
Mm,
everything about their lives. You communicate that as you build a relationship with your
mhm,
clients. um, and I think that is really the role of being an advisor, is just all encompassing, right? I think what we do differently is that we are the relationship. We know, your cats, your dogs, your kids, but we are also at the forefront of making the decisions that will impact your financial lives. um, I would say that, a lot of other advisory teams outsource, the planning work. So if you're coming to a team and um, you have financial planning questions or estate planning
mm,
questions, so you're typically outsourced to a team that does that. And I used to be on a team that does that, and so I know. And it's a very transactional feeling. You don't have that continuity of relationship. And on the investment side of things, you're typically, you might be outsourced to third party investment managers. And so the thing that stays constant is the advisory relationship, right?
mm,
Within our team, my business partner, Jack, and I, we are the relationship. We are the advisors. We are the tax and estate, planners. We are the investment managers. My partner, Jack, is the investment manager. He's done
mhm,
portfolio management and institutional portfolio
mm,
management. And so We know the ins and outs of, your goals, your long-term goals, your short-term goals, what you hope to achieve, and we plan everything around it. We plan your investments, we plan your financial plan and your
Mm,
estate plan, your legacy around that relationship of how well we know you and what your goals are.
yeah. I'm hearing really high touch, a really high touch experience in your team. And I'm thinking back and thinking as we talk about the impact that you want to make and that you are making on the families around the through story, and the money is a part of that story, that is the sort of the essence of where the stories come from and how they're shaped. That's a word you've used a few times in this conversation, actually, how things are shaped, whether it shaped your own life or shaping others.
Yeah,
Talking about influence, I'm really getting that sense of why this high touch in your relationships is so important, because the kind of impact you're wanting to make requires that the story, the story, and
exactly.
as in the bigger context of from then until the future, right? From past to
Exactly.
future.
Yeah. Everything is intertwined within our team. We don't outsource anything. So we
Yeah,
know that every single recommendation that we give to a client, we're taking into consideration all the different aspects of their lives.
yeah.
We quarterback and coordinate with their estate lawyer, their accountant, all their other trusted professionals in their lives to ensure that they have this cohesive, collaborative experience and that everybody's on the same page.
Right. Why is this cohesive collaborative experience, this total immersion, if you will, where did this come from? Why is that so important to you?
It, when you say that, it just brings me back to, when somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to, I get a designation in it. And I think it's just so important to have a cohesive, collaborative, holistic team of professionals that help you, that are all on the same page and are all aligned with your goals and your values and, your intentions. I think that lots of advisors are, tax minimization first, or
Mm-hmm.
maximizing
Mm-hmm.
returns first. But my you know my story is intention always comes first. What is your intention, and how can we plan around that in the most tax efficient manner, in the best way possible, that drives returns, that meets your goals, that is tax efficient, that everybody is on the same page for, but it's always intention first.
Mm. So you're all moving forward to the same thing. Have you played on a team? Just curious. Before sport, well,
Well,
you played hockey, right? You
growing up
said
playing
that.
ice hockey, yes.
Yeah. Do you think that had any influence on it? Like I often see analogies between business teams, if you will, and sports teams, and how different people play, whether they have had team experience or whether they have not had team experience as a younger person, particularly through sport. As you reflect on your hockey career, how long did that go on? How long was hockey for you?
Okay, so I played for about 4 years between elementary and high school, and then I went back into it as an adult and played beer league for a couple of years, and then I had kids, and so now my son plays hockey, and the only
Okay.
time I get to play on the ice is with him, and he's
Right.
5.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like, absolutely, I think it does make an impact on how we run our practice. I think that everybody has certain positions within our team, and we all work together to achieve a common goal, right?
Mm.
um, and making sure that we're utilized in the most efficient manner, that the best of our abilities and our attributes are showing up for our clients every day.
Yeah. What about how was hockey for you? I want to take you back to that experience as a young woman playing hockey, particularly as a girl, as a teenager, young teenager playing hockey. What was that experience for you, and what did you get from it?
Oh gosh, I think it just made me more competitive in life. With myself though. So funny enough, I had no interest in hockey. I was in grade 6,
Oh,
and my parents, or my mom specifically, because she loved watching hockey. I have an older brother and older sister. She enrolled all three of us in ice hockey the same year.
that's awesome.
And just because there is not enough girls out there that play hockey, I there was only one team of my age group in that area that I resided in. And so I was put on that team, and it was a tier 1 team, meaning it was
Oh
the
my goodness.
best.
Got thrown in.
Exactly. Yeah, I was thrown in. I was a bench warmer. I remember walking onto the ice with my skate guards on for the very first practice because I did not even know how to skate. So
Fantastic.
I went on wearing hockey equipment for the first time, getting on the ice, being the worst player on the bench, to then just wanting to be better, improving and working hard and just excelling. And so I think it, like, honestly, just seeing my sister also start hockey in the same year, and
Mm.
because she was put on a team that wasn't as competitive, I think that also shaped, her relationship to hockey as well. She didn't play for very long. I think I played the longest out of all three of us. But I think that really shaped my competitive nature in, excelling in everything that I do.
Well, it's interesting. It sounds as well like some people in that same position would be highly resistant to continuing that sport, right? Feeling like a beginner in an expert field in that domain. But there's something about you that we might say accepts the challenge,
Yeah,
right?
I was challenge accepted. Yeah, same with the estate planning story, right?
Yeah, rise to the challenge, like, okay, I can do this. Is that something that started with you as a little girl? Do you think that was something nurtured by your family situation or elsewhere? Is that,
Yeah.
yeah, where did that come from? This accept the challenge, the bigger the challenge, the better, by the sounds of things.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I was the third kid, so I was the forgotten one. I was the one who was always being compared to her siblings. Well,
Mm.
your sister's doing this, your brother's doing this. And so, you know, it internally it was always within me to rise up to the challenge and to overcome my fears and to overcome any challenges that were presented in my life, and of course inspired by the DNA of my dad, right, and what he had to overcome throughout his life.
Because you knew his story.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. I often wonder, is that something that, lots of younger kids, I also have a younger brother. So lots of the younger kids, they're, looking up at their siblings and going, I want to do that or I can do that. And so there's often a part of a younger child where they're reaching to
Yeah.
perform at the level of their siblings, right, as they're little kids
Yeah.
and growing up.
Yeah.
Um, but you've spoken specifically about fear. Earlier, you referred to vulnerability. Um, where did you, how did you learn to not just accept the fear, but allow it to be fuel for you as opposed to debilitating?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's, being the black sheep of the family, the third kid, rising up to the challenge. I was always in an environment where it was not enough, or, you could do better. And
Mm.
I think that, I think it's the stubbornness in me, like the stubbornness in me that says, you can't tell me that I can't do this. I mean, sorry, side story. It was almost like when I was pregnant, every time people said you couldn't eat sushi, all I did was eat sushi. You
Okay.
can't you can't tell me that I can't do something, because I will do it. I think
Aha.
it's just the stubbornness in me, I think.
That is awesome. So, note to your clients, whatever, if you want to challenge, that's the way to do it. If you want to challenge Alysha, that's awesome. So, there's something about you that says, "Of course, I can do that." And to your point, you've mentioned your father several times, and that influence on knowing his story and the difficult circumstances. Um, when you think about going forward and family stories and family legacy, As you consider your own clients, not anyone individually necessarily, but as you think about the story you want for them to have going forward, what are you hoping to inspire in their future story through your work?
I am hoping to inspire them that these conversations can happen. I want to take down these barriers uh, between, generations of having these discussions to influence the next generation to be stewards of their wealth. Um, I think that is probably the biggest impact that I can make as an advisor, for future generations.
Mm. And what is it about that that is so important to you?
I think that it brings meaning to our clients. I think it's meaningful to
Mm.
leave a legacy behind and it doesn't have to be a legacy of money. It can just be,
Mm.
your childhood story, or the hardship that you have gone through, or your family's culture. Just
Yeah.
leaving behind legacies for future generations, I think is so deeply meaningful for families. And maybe it's something that I had wished, my grandparents had left behind, stories of their childhood. And so just encouraging clients and their families to have these conversations um, helps me define, impact.
Yeah. You're shaping their stories, right?
Yeah.
In helping along, helping not just to shape them, but also to inspire them and even facilitate that they happen. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So, where's your next learning coming from as you're thinking about your curiosity? What's capturing your, what's sparking your interest now?
Oh gosh, I'm running out of designations to take. Um, so there are a few themes that I really wanted to focus on this year, or this past year and this upcoming year. And one of them is disability planning. Uh, I think that from an educational standpoint, I worked with lots of clients that have, disabled beneficiaries, and ensuring that they are financially taken care of.
Mhm.
Um, but one thing that I didn't realize is, you know, the continuity of community is, if not more important than the financial aspect of a disabled beneficiary. And so just learning more about the systems in place to help with continuity, after, you're a parent of a disabled beneficiary
Mhm.
is gone, to ensure that continuity of relationships, of care, of growth. I think that is kind of the next step of where I want to to learn more about.
Right.
Um, and then also, I've just recently, late last year, taken a designation in philanthropy, and so just leaving behind legacies, I think are very important. And obviously, there's a lot of tax
Mhm.
efficiencies in doing so, but leaving behind a story and leaving behind a financial gift to a charity that matters to your family, that tells your family story, I think is kind of the next area that I'm exploring more deeply.
Thank you. If just in the last few minutes here, I'd love to hear a little bit more if you could expand on that. How might philanthropy help someone, a family, tell their story?
Yeah, I think it shares with your family about what is important to you. I've helped so many clients in the last few years tell their story through philanthropy, um, just in terms of benefiting those organizations that made an impact in their life. Um, so also an example for myself, I've established something called the Donor Advised Fund for my family, and as I contribute to it over time, and it grows in value, I'm so excited for my kids when I'm thinking 10 is the age, but we'll see depending on maturity at that time. I want them to help manage my donor advised fund, our family legacy and our family fund. I want them to do the research and tell me what charities and organizations made an impact in their life and why that matters and why they want to donate funds and help contribute to this charitable organization. And these conversations in my family had started early for my kids. For my son's fourth birthday last year or the other year, we for his birthday party, I asked for a toonie for him to enjoy and a toonie for him to donate. And so after gathering all his toonies after his party, we had lengthy conversations about different charitable organizations and how they help. And he ended up donating his toonies to BC Children's Hospital. And it was just the most fulfilling experience that I've had with him. So I'm really excited to pass on these stories and these legacies and, just helping my kids be stewards of their wealth.
Yeah. That's the theme, right? Being stewards. How do you hope that experience for your son might shape his future?
I'm hoping that it teaches him about generosity, about helping others, about, uplifting those in his community and finding ways, not just financially, but finding ways to help those in his community. And just have that mindset of generosity and being able to impact and help, I think is what I'd love for him to understand and leave behind for his future kids.
Right. So there's in your own world, you're building a legacy of impact and generosity and all that goodness that helps people feel like their life is meaningful.
Absolutely.
Right. Beyond themselves. That's lovely. So, Alysha, for those who are interested in finding out more about how you and your team supports them or can support them with their own legacy and story, where might they find you?
You can find me via email, LinkedIn, by phone. That sounds so old school. How do people find people nowadays? I have a website. I found it almost sounds like we're talking about a dating service here.
So your website, we can find, and I'll make sure that the link is in there. And are you active on any social channels where people might be able to follow you?
Yes, I do post articles on LinkedIn.
Okay.
So that's another place to find me.
Great.
Yeah.
All righty. And as we're finally winding up, is there any last piece of wisdom, Alysha, that you might like our listeners to remember from this conversation?
I think that, just leaving behind a legacy doesn't have to be monetary. And having discussions about what legacy you want to leave behind are important and meaningful for families and generations to come.
A beautiful last note. Thank you for joining us today. It's been a real treat.
Thank you, Michèle. Thank you so much. It's been so nice to chat with you. I can't believe this hour had passed by so fast.
It goes quick. Thanks for being here. We'll look forward to the next one. Bye for now.